Welcome to this space and time for meditation, a journey through the very fabric of the universe. Make sure you are comfortable, sitting or lying down, whatever allows your body to feel supported as we part to discover different eras in time. Take a moment to adjust, so there is nothing you need to hold up, nothing you need to keep doing. Let your hands rest. If it feels right, allow your eyes to close or soften your gaze. Feel the surface beneath you, the earth beneath that, the very planet, steady, quiet, completely reliable. Let it carry your weight. Bring your attention to the natural rhythm of your breath. No need to change it. Simply notice, breathing in and breathing out. With each exhale, invite the body to settle a little more. Forehead soft. Space behind the eyes calm. Relax your jaw. Let your shoulders melt down and back. Feel your chest gently rise and fall. Belly softening. Hips relax. Legs release, all the way to the feet. For the next little while, seconds will become vast oceans of time. There is nothing you need to achieve here, nothing to figure out. Listen. Open your heart to the human story. Allow yourself to drift into that place somewhere between waking and dreaming. And from there, we begin our journey together, on the shoulders of giants, and looking over the horizon, into the invisible, across space and across time. Now, feel the heartbeat of the world, the music of the living, music we first heard even before our birth. In the dimness, before ever seeing, we heard our mother's voice, the rhythm of her heartbeat, and within her, the distant murmur of the world. We lived, we floated, we slept, we dreamed, without ever breathing. Then we were born, plunged into cold and noise and light. We suddenly, for the first time, filled our lungs with air and let out our very first cry. That small, painful cry, barely formed, that fragile newborn mule, entered her soul, her heart, her entire exhausted body, and, without thinking, she reached out her arms. Within her, something like a surge of joy passed through, a movement toward a new happiness that had just come into being. In a single instant, she felt released, soothed, happy as she had never been before. Her heart and her flesh came back to life. She felt herself become a mother. "It is a love I quite literally had no idea existed," wrote Marie Darrieussecq. "I had heard of it. I sometimes saw it around me. I imagined it. I could even conceive of it. But I didn't know it concerned me. When the baby was born, astonishment and love became one. I loved him, and I admired him simply for being there, for having emerged in such an incongruous, almost insolent way. I found it hard to believe that other babies do the same." In the delivery room, we were 4. The baby's father, the obstetrician, the nurse, and me. And then, all at once, we were 5. His presence was astonishing, incomprehensible. His tiny feet were kicking, those same feet that had kicked inside my belly, and I could hardly believe he had come out of me. "Every day," wrote Camille Lorenz, "every day I look at my daughter as if she had just been born, and I still can't get over it. One never recovers from birth. One stays inside it, one remains there. I marvel at her gestures, her smiles, her words. It is always the first time. I remember a line, whose author I have forgotten, that for me sums up maternal love. You must know how to place your whole being into a leaf and let it drift away. Bringing a child into the world is an upheaval, and even before the upheaval of birth itself, there are the deep emotional and affective transformations of pregnancy, along with a metamorphosis of the entire body, a body immersed in a sea of hormones. Progesterone production rises to levels more than 10 times higher than those reached after ovulation in a normal cycle. Estrogen production during pregnancy exceeds the total amount produced over a woman's entire life outside of pregnancy. And during childbirth, the body releases yet more hormones, including oxytocin and prolactin. Studies have shown that during puberty, the sudden surge of estrogen and progesterone in girls and testosterone in boys profoundly affects not only bodily changes and patterns of behavior, but also the anatomical organization of the brain itself. Could pregnancy and childbirth have a similar effect on the structuring of a mother's brain? This question was explored for the first time in a study published on December 15, 2016, in Nature Neuroscience. The research was conducted in the Department of Cognitive Neuroscience at the Autonomous University of Barcelona by Elseline Hoeksma, a researcher in the Brain Development Laboratory at Leiden University in the Netherlands, together with 12 other scientists. The researchers asked women who had not yet had children, but who wished to become mothers, whether they would agree to participate in a study involving brain imaging using MRI. If they became pregnant and gave birth to their first child, a second brain scan would be carried out 3 weeks after the birth. As a control group, the researchers recruited women who had not yet had children and who did not plan to have one in the near future. These women underwent the same brain imaging at the outset of the study, and then again approximately 1 year later. Of the 43 women who expressed a desire to have a child, 25 became pregnant and gave birth during the study period. Comparing images of their brains taken before pregnancy with those taken 3 weeks after childbirth revealed a striking change in brain architecture. A significant reduction in the volume of grey matter in certain regions at the surface of the brain, the cerebral cortex. Regions known to be involved in empathy and in the ability to place oneself in another's perspective, what neuroscientists call theory of mind. The only other detectable change was a reduction in the volume of the hippocampus, a structure that plays a central role in the formation of long-term memory. And yet, tests carried out with these mothers showed no decline in their memory abilities. The reduction in hippocampal volume therefore likely reflects a reorganization of memory processes rather than a loss of memory capacity itself. No such structural changes were observed in the brains of the 20 women in the control group who did not become pregnant. Were the changes observed in the brains of women 3 weeks after childbirth caused by pregnancy and birth themselves? Or were they the result of early bonding with the baby, of stress, of sleep deprivation, of the profound disruption of daily life brought about by the demanding presence of a newborn? To address this question, the researchers also invited the partners of the women in the study, partners who themselves had never had children, to undergo the same brain imaging at the same intervals. The results showed no detectable changes in the architecture of their brains over a period of about 1 year. And so, even though fathers are often deeply involved in caring for their newborns, though rarely to the same degree as mothers, these findings suggest that the mere arrival of a baby in the household is probably not the primary cause of the brain changes observed in women after the birth of their first child. To explore further the functional significance of these changes, the researchers asked the young mothers, while they were inside the brain scanner, to look at photographs, sometimes of their own baby, sometimes of other babies. When they looked at images of their own child, the regions of the brain that showed the strongest activation were precisely those regions that had undergone structural modification, areas involved in empathy and in the emotional bond linking mother and newborn. During the first 2 months after his birth, writes Marie Dariussec, I was only half in the world. I heard only half of what people said to me, saw people only halfway, read books poorly. Half of my brain belonged to him. Was he warm enough? Was he breathing properly? Hadn't I heard him whimper? It was a kind of madness. I was in constant contact with another world, like an extraterrestrial endlessly perceiving, inside her skull, the echoes of her planet of origin. I was gifted with ubiquity, with hypersensitivity. And later, in the house where we spend our holidays, I write in the garden. The baby sleeps in a calm, cool room, protected from cats and drafts. Several doors separate us. I sense his awakening. I get up. He has just opened his eyes. He plays with his hands. He sings. He is not crying yet. Is there some kind of clock ticking inside my brain? Has a sixth sense been granted to me, one that detects, without my knowing it, without my seeking it, his changes deep within the house? As if the sound of trees, birds, and wind were overlaid with an intimate frequency, another way of listening. 6 months after childbirth, the researchers asked the mothers to complete a questionnaire designed to measure the strength of emotional attachment between mother and baby. The results revealed a clear relationship. The greater the changes observed in the brain, specifically, the greater the reduction in grey matter volume in regions involved in empathy, the stronger the mother's emotional attachment to her child. These structural changes therefore appear to be associated with a strengthening of the bond between mother and child, with heightened attention and heightened empathy. But what exactly does this reduction in grey matter mean? Does it reflect a loss of certain neurons, or of other brain cells, such as those forming blood vessels? Or does it instead reflect a tightening of neural networks, a reduction in the distance between neurons, signaling stronger, more efficient connections? The study does not allow us to say. However, an earlier study, published in 2015 in Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience, suggested that, in young adults, reduced cortical thickness in certain regions of the brain is associated with a greater ability to interpret the intentions and mental states of others, a greater capacity to put oneself in another's place. And so, less may mean more. A reduction in grey matter volume in certain regions of the brain involved in empathy may signify greater empathy, greater intersubjectivity, more room within oneself for the other, vulnerable, helpless, entirely dependent on us. But how long can this imprint, inscribed by motherhood at the deepest level of the mother, endure? To address this question, Elseline Huxema and her colleagues asked the 25 mothers who had taken part in the original study whether they would agree to undergo another brain scan 2 years after giving birth. Among the 11 mothers who had not become pregnant again during that interval, the researchers carried out a new round of brain imaging 2 years after the birth of their first child. One of the changes observed 3 weeks after childbirth, a reduction in hippocampal volume, was no longer detectable. The hippocampus had returned to its original size. By contrast, the other changes in brain architecture, the reduction in grey matter volume in certain regions of the cerebral cortex involved in empathy, had persisted. They were still present 2 years later. How much longer might this reshaping of the brain last? 5 years? 10 years? A lifetime? We do not know. What this study suggests, however, is that becoming a mother is a true metamorphosis. It is, in a certain sense, becoming other. Sometimes researchers are intimately involved with the subjects they study. Sometimes, as Borges put it, researchers are what they are seeking. I was pregnant with my first child when I analysed the results of this study, says Elzaline Huxama. Unfortunately, I was unable to carry out brain imaging before and after my first pregnancy. Today, after this initial study, which lasted a total of 5.5 years, Elzaline Huxama is pregnant again. And yes, she says, this time I did have an MRI before pregnancy, and I will have MRIs again after giving birth. This astonishing sculpting of the brain by motherhood, revealed by the study published by Elzaline Huxama and her colleagues, does it arise from the profound biological transformations induced by pregnancy and childbirth, or from the deep psychological, emotional, and affective changes experienced by a woman as she begins to weave a bond with her newborn? Or is it a combination of both? The study does not allow us to answer. To explore this question further, it would be necessary to conduct the same study with women who enter motherhood through adoption. It would be necessary to follow women who intend to adopt a child before and after that child's arrival. To be born, says Camille Lorenz, is a paradoxical abandonment. One separates from a being without whom one cannot live. The native land is always an exile. The first land we come from and leave at birth is not a land at all. It is the interior of our mother's body, whose blood nourishes us. Then we separate, and we meet again for the first time, in a new form. From the moment we are born, we discover hunger. And like all mammals, for more than 200 million years, we are nourished by milk. In many more than 1,000 human languages, it is the syllable ma, repeated by the baby, ma, 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 that has given its name to the mother, the one who nourishes, the one who gives milk. Maman in French, maman in Italian, mama in Chinese. In Latin, mama, meaning both breast and mother, gave rise to the word mammal. A nursing mother, says Zola, is she not the image of the world continued and saved? That a baby feeds exclusively on milk astonishes me day after day, says Marie Dariussec. Milk is thus the miracle food, the royal jelly of the human being. But whether the baby drinks milk from the breast or from a bottle, whether it is the milk of its own mother or another's, or infant formula, what matters is tenderness. The milk of human tenderness, says Jorge Semprún. The sheer fact of coming into the world, which brings joy. Taking the baby in one's arms, looking at them, smiling at them, speaking to them, giving them the milk of human tenderness. We emerge from this ancient crucible, says Francois Cheng, from the fullness that springs from the encounter between two beings. Birth, says Camille Lorenz, is also knowledge, a co-birth. There is the mother who brings into the world, and there is the child who comes into the world. It goes together, it holds together. All real life is encounter, says Martin Buber. In the beginning is relation. When the only thing we know about love, says the poet Emily Dickinson, is that love is the only thing that exists, and that this is enough. In our earliest childhood, we are incapable of walking, speaking, feeding ourselves, or protecting ourselves from cold or danger. And from this absolute dependence arises an extraordinary capacity for learning and adaptation, a sculpting of our brain and our mind by our human and social environment, by the presence of others. We are born immature, and then we invent ourselves through our relationships with others. Our lives begin as a wordless dialogue, says Siri Hustvedt. And without this dialogue, we would not grow. From the moment we enter the world, our vital bond with the other begins to take shape. We discover, dazzled, the smile and the gaze of the other, which we make our own. We need those who lean toward us, smile at us, take us in their arms, speak to us, and respond to us. The first bond, the very first dialogue. The more the baby babbles, the more we imitate them, says Marie Darrieussecq. They form clear, recognizable syllables, da, be, re. The play of their intonations enchants us. We converse by echo. A house ruled by a baby is a madhouse. Yesterday I held him in my arms. He fixed his gaze on a point in space, reached his hand into emptiness, and smiled. Then he seemed to listen. He answered Glibawija and burst out laughing. And every day, continues Marie Darrieussecq, every day love grows, unheard of, unexpected. Oh, the love of a mother, song from on high, love no one ever forgets. At every moment, says Jacques Chessex, I carry images of my mother that pierce my heart. My mother in the mountains, in summer, landscapes of golden grasses, solar flowers where volcanoes with wings of fire tremble. Always her azure gaze, her laughter, her quick stride along the ridge. I am 4 years old. My mother lifts me into her arms, rocks me while humming a song in a clear voice, then sets me down. I look at her. Her eyes have that pre-shadow color where blue and gray gleam as if rising from within, from something hidden in her that I love. Oh, mother, your eyes of pale silver, I, slate. I am 7, 8 years old. I have my mother almost to myself, and I melt into her. The pre-Alps redden, elms, birds suspended in the dazzling sky, thistles gleaming on the rough slope. Evening is cold and pink in the mountains. I press myself against my mother. Night falls. Who will speak of that tenderness already wounded by the idea of loss, of letting slip away, of not deserving, of disappointing? Joy and fear, the tragic fear of not deserving this joy, the fear that it will vanish, the fear of finding oneself alone, abandoned to oneself, the fear that presence will turn into absence. What we learned, says Emily Dickinson, was that my first knowledge was of you, in the warm light of morning, and my first fear that the unknown would engulf you in the night. And sometimes the rupture occurs in reality, loss happens, and the mother disappears into the night. But one never finishes searching for her, summoning her within oneself. In her presence, everything came alive. She cast around her an enchanted light, so that through her eyes the world dressed itself in radiant colours. It is a novel, The Goldfinch, by the writer Donna Tartt. Theo loses his mother when he is 13. After my mother's death, says Theo, I made great efforts to keep her image in mind as I fell asleep, hoping perhaps to dream of her, but that never happened. Or rather, I dreamed of her constantly, but as absence, not as presence. a breeze moving through a house just vacated, her handwriting on a notepad, her perfume, streets in strange lost cities where I knew she had walked for a time, but from which she had fled, a shadow retreating from a sunlit wall. Sometimes I spotted her in a crowd or in a departing taxi, and I cherished those fleeting visions despite my constant inability to catch up with her. Each time she slipped away, I never managed to find my mother, but that night I did, or rather, she found me. She appeared suddenly behind me. In the reflection of a mirror, her image froze me with happiness. She smiled at me, more beautiful, unlined, with her dark hair and that peculiar upward tilt of her mouth. It was less a dream than a presence filling the entire room, and though I wished it with all my strength, I knew I could not turn around, that to look at her directly would violate the laws of her world and mine. She had come to me in the only way she could, and our eyes met in the mirror for a long, motionless moment. I was mute, and she was as happy to see me as I was to see her. She stood between me and I don't know what place she had come from, some landscape beyond. For an instant, everything revolved around her, an instant within her field of attraction, where one could live forever. She existed only in the mirror, within the confines of the frame, and at the very moment when she was about to speak, with what seemed a mixture of amusement and tenderness, in a breath whose sound I can still hear today, I woke up. When we are fortunate enough to have our mother accompany us through life, there sometimes comes a time when the roles are reversed. Then it is the child who becomes the parent of their mother. My mother, my child, says Tahar Ben Jaloun. It is a book filled with love, devoted to his mother. It begins like this. Since she became ill, my mother has become a small being with a faltering memory. She calls for members of her family long dead, speaks to them, wonders why her mother does not come to visit her, praises her little brother who, she says, always brings her gifts. They gather around her bedside and spend long moments together. I do not contradict her. I do not disturb them. My mother revisits my childhood, continues Ben Jaloun. Her memory has overturned, scattered on wet ground. Time and reality no longer coincide. And later, I fed my mother, my child, a little girl eating with her eyes closed, and my hand trembles with emotion. Taking her hand, speaking to her, telling her a story, and waiting for a sign from eyelids or lips that barely move. Memories need sun, light, and music. It is summer on the terrace of the house in Marchand, facing the sea. The east wind is raging, which irritates my mother. She says she misses the time when she lived in Fez, in the Medina, where the wind never dared enter. I watch her and see her again tightening a scarf around her head. In this ambiguous light of the past, voices cross, gazes intertwine, in search of a gentle serenity. My mother has always been serene. She never entirely lost that ability to be present in the world with calm and grace. She smiles and closes her eyes. I love my mother for what she is, for what she gave me, continues Ben Jaloun. I often say to myself, what would I be without the blessing of parents? Blessing has nothing to do with religion. One owes respect, care, and love to those who gave us life. I am not ashamed to claim this blessing. It is a passion, a silk thread stretched between two beings, a free, simple, self-evident love. And later still, the past resurfaces, a past unknown before the beginning, before even memory, a past reinvented in the form of dreams. I will see her again, young and beautiful, says Tahar Ben Jaloon. I will see her again pregnant with me, in the heat of a suffocating summer. I will see her again seated yesterday in Razem, while I cling to her breasts. I will see her again in spring in Ifran, at my aunt's house, light, happy, carefree. I await these dreams, and I will wake in sadness, because my mother will not be there. I will be the inconsolable child, bored at school, preferring the intimacy of women and afternoon gatherings at home. I will take refuge in the cellar among the storage jars and frighten her. I will emerge shouting with joy at having succeeded. I will spot her in a crowd, and she will not recognize me. I will wake with a start and cry for help. I will go to the terrace of our first house in Tangier and look out to sea beside her. I will speak to her, and she will not hear me. I will tell her that I miss her, and she will let the wind untangle her hair and cover her eyes. She will not resist the wind. She will turn away and leave with it. No one is born only once, says the poet Anne Michaels. No one is born only once. If we are fortunate, one day we will be born again in the arms of another. But the very first love remains the very first promise, the promise of dawn. The Promise of Dawn is the title of Romain Gary's autobiography, a field of love devoted to his mother, filled with tenderness, humour, melancholy, and anguish. His mother, Mina, whom he calls Nina, whom he would recreate 15 years later as a strange reincarnation, Madame Rosa, the adoptive mother of little Momo, in the novel The Life Before Us, published under the name Émile Ajar. The Life Before Us as an echo of The Promise of Dawn. It is not good to be so loved, so young, so early, Gary writes in The Promise of Dawn. It gives you bad habits. You believe it has happened, that it exists elsewhere, that it can be found again. You count on it, you search, you hope, you wait. With maternal love, life makes you, at dawn, a promise it never keeps. I am not saying that mothers should be prevented from loving their children, Gary continues. I am simply saying that it is better if mothers have someone else to love as well. If my mother had had a lover, I would not have spent my life dying of thirst beside every fountain. In June 1940, after the armistice, he leaves France, joins General de Gaulle in England, and enlists in the Free French Air Forces. His mother writes to him from Nice. The first letters from my mother, says Gary, reached me shortly after my arrival in England. They were sent clandestinely via Switzerland, from where a friend of my mother forwarded them to me regularly. Until my return to Nice, 3 years and 6 months later, until the eve of my return home, these letters, undated, outside time, followed me everywhere faithfully. For 3.5 years, I was sustained by a breath and a will greater than my own. And that umbilical cord transmitted into my blood the courage of a heart stronger than the one beating inside me. Gary is wounded. He receives the Cross of Liberation, the War Cross, the Legion of Honour. He publishes his first book, European Education, and has his mother informed of his return through the Portuguese embassy. The landings had taken place. Soon the war would be over, and in the notes reaching me from Nice, one could sense a kind of joy and serenity, as if my mother knew she was finally reaching her goal. There was even a gentle humour I did not fully understand. My darling son, she wrote, it has been many years since we were separated, and I hope you have now grown accustomed to not seeing me, for after all, I am not here forever. Remember that I never doubted you. I hope that when you return and understand everything, you will forgive me. I could not do otherwise. What could she have done? What was I meant to forgive her for? A little later, Romain Gary returns to Nice. At the Hôtel Pension Mermont, where I stopped the jeep, there was no one to greet me. They had vaguely heard of my mother, but did not know her. My friends were scattered. It took several hours to learn the truth. My mother had died 3.5 years earlier, a few months after my departure for England. But she knew that I could not stand upright without feeling supported by her, and she had taken precautions. In the final days before her death, she wrote nearly 250 letters, which she entrusted to her friend in Switzerland. I was not to know. The letters were to be sent to me regularly. That was no doubt what she was plotting with love when I caught that look of cunning in her eyes at the Saint Antoine Clinic, where I saw her for the last time. And so I continued to receive from my mother the strength and courage I needed to persevere, even though she had been dead for more than 3 years. The umbilical cord continued to function. The book is a song of love for his mother, who gave birth to him in Vilno, today Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, which at the time belonged to Russia and, after the First World War, to Poland. His mother emigrated with him to France, and they settled in Nice in 1928 when he was 14. The Promise of Dawn ends with this extraordinary proof of love, this dialogue beyond death, this presence that sustained him through the war. But this moving tribute is also a writer's invention. Romain Gary's mother died shortly after his departure, and Gary was fully aware of her illness, writes Mireille Sacotte in her commentary on The Promise of Dawn. The farewell scene at the hospital in Nice likely corresponds to their final meeting. He was informed of his mother's death very quickly after arriving in London. She was accompanied until the end by Sylvia and René Ajari, her childhood friends, to whom the book is rightly dedicated. She never wrote a single posthumous letter to him. It is therefore a profoundly moving and remarkably skillful literary invention. It is the means Gary found, beyond the chapters devoted to childhood and adolescence, where their shared life was self-evident, to keep this couple alive in the third part of the book, the war years, where they were not only separated, but where she was, in fact, irrevocably silent. Here, the logic of the novelist prevailed over the fidelity of the biographer, and so the umbilical cord functioned magnificently between mother and son, but in the opposite direction. It was the son, the writer, who kept his dead mother alive throughout the war, and not the other way around. In doing so, says Mireille Sacotte, he repaid his debt to her by granting her a few more years of life, years of presence for us, the readers, in the pages of a book. And perhaps also for him, as he writes, remembers, and imagines her suddenly there, beside him. For the very first love is carried within us, like a promise that never ceases to be reborn. Let the dead one return to love, says Pascal Quignard. Let the score sound in the silence, within you. It is not my mother who lies underground, says Tahar Ben Jaloun. My mother is here. I hear her laugh. To bring a child into the world, says Marie Darrieussecq, one must affirm the joy of bringing into the world, the wonder of allowing a consciousness to pass through. One pushes out of the water a being who will live, born of currents, fluids, and time, more than of oneself. More than of oneself, and from farther than oneself, Our children pass through us from farther than we do, says the poet Khalil Gibran. And a woman holding a baby to her breast said, "Speak to us of children." And he said, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, they do not belong to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life does not go backward, nor linger with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. We have all once been defenseless beings, incapable of feeding ourselves, protecting ourselves, or living alone, without the tenderness of adults who bent over us. And later, we will try to give back, to those around us and to those who will survive us, what we ourselves received at the very beginning of our existence, from those to whom we had not yet given anything, and from so many others we will never know. Do we owe a debt simply because we were born? Asks the novelist Marguerite Atwood. Are we debtors simply because we exist? And if so, what do we owe, and to whom, or to what? And how should we give back what we owe? Perhaps one can speak of a debt, says Pascal Quignard. I feel the need to repay a debt that arises from nativity itself. We are made by others, and by those who came before us. It may be that a counter-gift, even a derisory one, is necessary, according to a strange natural symmetry, in response to all that has been given to us in life. To give something back to life, and even to the earth lost in the stellar universe, an act of thanksgiving, of gratitude offered to the light, to that incredible chance of being, of which each of us was, for a few years at the very beginning, a still dense and almost luminous fragment. Our children are not our children, because they come from farther than us, and they do not belong to us. But we are responsible for children, for all children. And for this reason, all children, says Kailash Satyarthi, all deprived, exploited, abandoned children, are our children. In 2014, when he received the Nobel Peace Prize together with Malala Yousafzai, he said, "Friends, the Nobel Committee has generously invited me to give a lecture. Respectfully, I am incapable of doing so, because I represent here the sound of silence, the cry of innocence, and the face of invisibility."
I am representing here the sound of silence, the cry of innocence, and the face of invisibility. I represent millions of those children who are left behind. And that's why I have kept an empty chair as a reminder. I have come here only to share the voices and dreams of our children, because they are all our children. I have looked into their frightened and exhausted eyes. I have held their injured bodies, and I have felt their broken spirits. 20 years ago, in the foothills of the Himalayas, I met a small, skinny child laborer. He asked me, "Is the world so poor that it cannot give me a toy and a book instead of forcing me to take a gun or a tool?" I met a Sudanese child soldier. He was kidnapped by an extremist militia. As his first lesson, he was forced to kill his friends and family. He asked me, "What is my fault?" 12 years ago, a child mother from the streets of Colombia, trafficked, enslaved, raped, asked me this, "I have never had a dream. Can my child have one?" Friends, all the great religions teach us to care for our children. Jesus said, "Let the children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to them." Holy Quran says, "Kill not your children because of poverty." Friends, there is no greater violence than to deny the dreams of our children. Therefore, I refuse to accept that all the temples and mosques and churches and prayer houses have no place for the dreams of our children. I refuse to accept that the world is so poor when just 1 week of military expenditure can bring all the children to classrooms. I refuse to accept that all the laws and constitutions and police and judges are unable to protect our children. I refuse to accept that the shackles of slavery can ever be more stronger than the quest for freedom. I refuse to accept here. My only aim in life is that every child is free to be a child, free to grow and develop, free to eat, sleep, and see daylight, free to laugh and cry, free to play and learn, free to go to school, and above all, free to dream.